The man standing quietly inside the bank looked like someone who had nowhere else to go. His old black jacket was faded. One sleeve had a small tear near the wrist. His shoes were dusty, and his dark hair looked like it had been through a long night without sleep. People waiting in line barely noticed him, but the employees noticed, and they judged him. The man slowly walked toward the customer service desk, holding a worn brown envelope in both hands. His name was Keanu Reeves. He had come to the bank for something that sounded simple. He needed to withdraw $1,000. "Sir, do you have an appointment?" the young receptionist asked. Keanu shook his head. "No, I just need some help with a withdrawal." The receptionist looked at his clothes, then at the envelope. "Are you sure you're at the right bank?" Keanu gave a small smile. "I'm sure." She pointed toward the waiting area. "You can sit over there." Keanu nodded and walked away. Didn't complain, he didn't argue, he simply sat down. For nearly 20 minutes, nobody called his name. Then an elderly woman entered the bank carrying a small handbag. She looked nervous. Keanu noticed immediately. "Are you okay?" he quietly asked. The woman smiled weakly. "I'm trying to pay for my grandson's medical treatment." "I'm just afraid." Keanu looked at her. "Don't be afraid to ask for help." Before she could respond, a bank employee called her to the counter. Keanu watched her walk away. Then something strange happened. A security guard approached him. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Keanu looked surprised. "Why?" The guard lowered his voice. "Management says you're making customers uncomfortable." Keanu looked around. Nobody had complained. Nobody had even spoken to him. Still, he stood. Of course, he picked up his envelope. But before he could reach the door, a sharply dressed businessman entered the bank. The receptionist immediately smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison." The man's expensive watch caught the light as he walked past Keanu. Nobody questioned him. Nobody asked him to wait. Nobody asked why he was there. Keanu watched, silently. Then the businessman dropped a thick folder. Near the entrance, papers scattered across the floor. Keanu immediately bent down and began collecting them. "Hey!" the businessman snapped. "Don't touch those." Keanu froze. "I'm sorry. I was only trying to help." The businessman snatched the papers from his hands. "I can handle my own things." Keanu stepped back. For a moment, something painful crossed his face, not anger, disappointment. Then he returned to his seat. But the businessman never noticed the small envelope that had remained on the floor. Keanu did. He picked it up. On the front were 4 words. "Emergency Medical Fund." Keanu stared at it. Then he looked toward the businessman. Something wasn't right. He walked over. "Excuse me." The businessman turned. Keanu held out the envelope. "You dropped this?" The big man's face changed instantly. He grabbed it. "Where did you find it?" "Right there." The businessman opened it quickly. His hands were shaking. Inside was a photograph of a little girl. The man looked at the picture and whispered, "She's my daughter." Keanu nodded. "I hope she gets better." The businessman looked at him differently for the first time, but before he could say anything, the bank manager appeared. "Mr. Reeves." Keanu turned. The manager looked nervous. "We need to speak privately." Keanu followed him toward a small office. The manager closed the door. Then he placed a document on the desk. "We have a problem." Keanu looked down. It was a bank record, and beside his name was a number that made the manager's voice tremble. 1,000. Keanu slowly looked up. "That's not my account." The manager swallowed. "That's exactly what I was afraid you'd say." And suddenly, the reason Keanu had been treated so strangely became much more complicated than anyone expected. The manager locked the office door. Keanu remained standing. "What is this about?" The manager turned the computer screen toward him. A transfer had been made from an account connected to Keanu's name. The amount was $1 million, but Keanu had never authorized it. "I came here for $1,000, Keanu said quietly. "Not 1 million, I know. Then why is my name on this?" The manager didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened another file. "This account was created years ago." Keanu stared at the screen. Years ago? That made no sense. Then he noticed a name attached to the account. Daniel Reeves. Keanu's expression changed. Daniel had been his father, a man Keanu had spent years trying to understand, someone who had left behind more questions than answers. I haven't seen that name in a very long time, Keanu whispered. The manager leaned forward. Your father opened an account here before he disappeared from your life. Keanu said nothing. Then the office door suddenly opened. The elderly woman from the waiting area stood there. She was crying. Mr. Reeves? Keanu turned. I heard your name. She stepped inside. My grandson, her voice broke. The hospital says they need another payment. Keanu looked at her. How much? $1,000. The same amount he had originally come to. Withdraw. Keanu slowly understood why the day had brought him here. But there was another problem. His account was frozen. The manager shook his head. I can't release anything until we understand this. Transfer. Keanu looked toward the elderly woman. She wiped her eyes. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked. No, Keanu said. You did the right thing. He removed his old watch. It wasn't expensive, but it was clearly important to him. He placed it on the desk. Can this be sold? The manager stared at him. Sir, that's not necessary. Someone needs the money. The manager shook his head. Mr. Reeves, you don't understand. We may be looking at financial fraud. Keanu looked at the computer. Then find the truth. At that moment, the businessman from earlier entered the office. He looked embarrassed. I owe you an apology. Keanu turned. The man introduced himself as Michael Harrison. My daughter is sick, Michael said. The envelope you returned contained the last money I had. Keanu nodded. Michael looked at his clothes, then at the watch on the desk. You were willing to sell that? For someone you don't even know? Keanu answered simply. She needs it more than I do. Michael lowered his head. Then he said something that nobody expected. I can help. Keanu looked at him. Michael placed his business card on the desk. I own 3 medical supply companies. If the hospital needs something, call me. The room became silent. Then the manager's phone rang. He answered. His face slowly went pale. Yes, I understand. He hung up. The bank's security department found something. Everyone looked at him. The $1 million transfer wasn't made today. Keanu frowned. When was it made? The manager looked at the screen. 10 years ago. Keanu's breathing slowed. Who made it? The manager hesitated. Your father. Keanu closed his eyes. For 10 years, he had believed his father left him with nothing. No explanation. No message. No goodbye. But now a secret account had appeared. And inside that account was a fortune. Then the manager opened another document. This is a letter. Keanu looked at him. A letter. It was scheduled to be released only when you personally came to the bank. Keanu's hands began to shake. Read it. The manager opened the file. The first sentence appeared on the screen. Keanu, if you're reading this, I failed you as a father. Keanu couldn't breathe, but the letter contained something even more shocking. His father hadn't left the money for Keanu. He had left it for people who were struggling. And Keanu had unknowingly walked into the bank on the exact day the account was supposed to be activated. Then another line appeared. There is one condition. Keanu stared at the screen. What condition? The manager read the final sentence. You must decide whether the money belongs to you. The room fell silent. Keanu looked at the elderly woman, then at Michael, then at the $1 million account. He finally understood. The bank hadn't brought him there to become rich. It had brought him there to make a choice. Keanu sat quietly for several minutes. The $1 million could have changed his life. He could have bought a beautiful home, a luxury car, anything he wanted, but he kept thinking about the elderly woman sitting outside. Her grandson needed $1,000, and there were probably thousands of people like her. Keanu looked at the manager. How much of this money can actually be used to help people? The manager blinked. All of it. Keanu nodded. Then that's what should happen. Michael looked surprised. You don't want any of it? Keanu smiled faintly. My father spent years trying to fix his mistakes. He looked at the letter. Maybe this was his way of finally doing something. Right. The manager's eyes became wet. There is one more thing. He opened another document. The money had been placed into a special charitable account, but it had never been activated, so the account required a living family member to approve its purpose. Keanu picked up the Pen, what does it support? The manager answered, emergency medical assistance for families who can't afford treatment. Keanu looked toward the bank lobby. The elderly woman was still sitting there. He signed the manager, stared at the document. Then he whispered, it's done. But Keanu wasn't finished. He stood and walked into the lobby. Everyone turned toward him. The same man they had ignored earlier, the same man they had judged because of his clothes. Keanu approached the elderly woman. Your grandson's treatment will be covered. She stared at him. What? Keanu smiled. You don't have to worry about the payment. She covered her mouth. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Why would you do that? Keanu answered. Because someone once helped my family when we needed it. She hugged him. Keanu gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Across the lobby, the receptionist who had dismissed him stood, frozen. She slowly approached. Mr. Reeves. Keanu looked at her. I'm sorry, he nodded. No, she looked down. I judged you by your clothes, Keanu smiled. Most people do. Then he added, but clothes don't tell you what. Someone has survived. The word spread through the bank. Customers began listening. Even the security guard who had asked Keanu to leave stepped forward. I'm sorry too, Keanu shook his hand. You were doing your job. The manager then walked to the front of the bank. He announced that the institution would establish a new emergency assistance program funded by the account Keanu had activated. But Keanu added one condition. There should be no special treatment for people who look rich. He looked around, and no disrespect for people who don't. Everyone became silent. Michael Harrison stepped forward. I'll match the first donation. Then another customer raised her hand. I'll donate too. A second person followed, then a third. Within minutes, people who had entered the bank thinking only about their own problems were contributing to someone else's future. Keanu stood quietly. In the middle of it all, he hadn't come to become a millionaire. He had come for $1,000, but that $1,000 had uncovered a forgotten promise. Before leaving, Keanu returned to the manager's office. He picked up his old watch. The manager smiled. You can keep it. Keanu put it back on. Good. Then he looked at the letter one final time. His father's final words remained on the screen. Maybe one day you'll understand that the greatest thing we can leave behind isn't money. It's what we do with it. Keanu folded the letter. For the first time in years, he felt something inside him become lighter. Outside, the morning sun had begun to rise. People walked past the bank without knowing what had happened inside. They didn't know about the $1 million account. They didn't know about the forgotten letter, and they certainly didn't know that a man they had judged by his clothes had just changed the future of hundreds of families. Keanu walked down the sidewalk alone. His old jacket still had the tear. His shoes were still dusty. Nothing about his appearance had changed, but inside the bank, everything had changed, and perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. Never decide someone's worth by what they are wearing, because sometimes the person everyone ignores is carrying the very thing that could change everyone's life.